The IPL is back and it's 2022. More teams mean it's bigger than ever before, but yet they don't have any players. The mega auction next weekend will sort that out, and we're here to preview it and its process. Rich, welcome back to the 100 Club. It's been another busy week in cricket, but in less than a week now, we will be tucking into the final sort of morsels, if you will, of the IPL Mega-Auction for 2022. We've had a look at it. What do you think?
Oh, the Mega-Auction is always exciting. It happens once every 3 years because IPL contracts tend to run for 3 years. But this time around, because we have the two expansion teams, only a handful of players have been retained, which means that almost everybody's up for grabs. It's sort of the ultimate in team selection and strategy. It should be an amazing couple of days to see how the teams go about it.
It is hugely exciting in terms of the strategy you can take your teams and your franchises, but it's complicated, right? And there are a lot of elements to unpick. So that's what we're going to have a go at today, right? We get into some of the process. Some of the players are out there. Some of the players who weren't retained by teams, might be some interest there. And hopefully, sort of set yourself up for the competition itself, which is going to start on the 2nd of April and run for about 2 months. So we're going to have plenty of time to digest these teams once they've been given. But there's a fair bit of conjecture we can enjoy right now, right?
Yeah, and I think that we often say that administrators take sports fans for idiots. There's always this thing of, everything's too complicated. It is a little bit complicated, the mega auction, but that's what makes it so intriguing. There is so many strategic elements at play that it's an event in itself. It's sort of this culmination between fantasy sports, which are absolutely $1 billion industry these days. Fans around the world are sort of selecting squads in whatever sport you may name. But
everyone wants to be a director of cricket, right?
Everyone wants to be a GM. Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is the case they're actually doing it with the real life players to who are actually going to go out and compete on the field. So it's going to be fascinating.
Great. Okay. And if you're new to the channel, it's great. Thank you for joining us. Love having you here. If you give us a like, give us a comment and hit the subscribe button, we'd much appreciate that. And without further ado, with that dirty business done, let's have a first look at some of the conditions of the IPL this year. So firstly, the big news, which has been around for a while though, 10 teams. As yet though, we know the Lucknow Super Giants are coming. We're still waiting on some details for Ahmedabad, the branding, the team name and so forth, yeah?
Yeah.
Got any ideas?
Well, they were the Gujarat Lions before, weren't they? So there's a chance that, of course, the franchise owners of the Pune Super Giant decided to rename their new franchise the Super Giants again. So
no longer rising. They've reached their peak.
Indeed.
Yeah. So we're expecting, I think, the Ahmedabad logo, team name, and so forth, actually over the coming weeks. So we should actually know them by the time of the the mega auction itself. And as you say, a mega auction. Explain what right to match means, though, and why it's not being used this time.
So in previous auctions, essentially, if a player was bid by a new team up to a new level, then his existing team had the right to match that new level, which means they could retain more of their players. But with the new expansion teams to make a level playing field, they're not allowed to do this time round. So that's sort of the major difference. Almost all the players are going to be up for grabs, with the exception of the retained ones, who we'll touch on in a sec.
Yeah. So with the retentions, each of the existing 8 franchises had a chance to retain up to 4. They didn't have to retain any at all, and there was a different pricing structure depending on how many they retained, up to a maximum. Well, we'll have a look at the pricing in a minute, but yeah. So depending on how many they kept, there had to be a mix of overseas and domestic players as well. The new franchises then came in from those that weren't retained and were allowed to make 3 special picks, essentially to give them a foundation. So all of the teams have got around 2, 3, 4 players to start with. Yeah. If my maths is right, that leaves them mostly with about 20 players to find. Yeah.
Yeah. Teams can have squad sizes between 18 to 25 and up to 8 overseas players. Of course, only 4 overseas players can play at any one time. So that's something to remember.
Yeah. And there's some more nitty-gritty detail in terms of replacement players if someone has to drop out through injury and so forth. They're largely going to come from unselected players, but there might be some net bowlers selected down the line, and essentially. But we're looking for about 18 to 25 players at this stage, as you say. And so there's got a lot of business to be discussed.
Indeed.
So the bare bones of the auction are next Saturday and Sunday, 12th and 13th of February. And there are a vast number of players, so not including those who've already been retained by the franchises or the super picks for the new franchises. There are 590 players registered. That's 370 Indian players and 220 overseas players. Is that a good balance? Do you think that feels like something you get your teeth into, Richard?
Well, you could do the maths quickly. I've said there's 25 maximum in a squad, and there's 10 franchises, so there's only 250 players you can get in. Now, over 1,000 players put themselves forward for the draft, of which only 590 were registered. So it is a good mix, but there's plenty of players there to choose from, and quite a few of these, well, nearly half of these players are going to go home without a contract.
Yeah, and it's an interesting mix as well. I mean, there's only 7 players from associate nations, for instance, and about a 50-50 split of capped and uncapped players, with the vast majority of the uncapped being amongst the domestic Indian players. But I might have liked a few more associate players making it their way through, given some of the performances we saw in the World Cup recently. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. But
well, we'll see. Maybe Curtis Camp will get a reward for his forfeit.
Yeah, but this is the biggest T20 tournament in the world cricket. So this isn't a development league, to get the associates through. I think there are plenty of opportunities to address that, but maybe not necessarily IPL.
Yeah, well, I think we can have a good look at the players list, and that is now out there on the BCCI website. And I'll stick a link down below in the description. So if you want to get through that, are you willing to advertise your app as well, Rich?
Yeah, I'll whack it in the thing below, so you can see all the players who are involved.
Yeah, so Rich, being the man he is, has made a little app. I'll stick a link down below, so you can have a look through by price and so forth. Do a little bit of fantasy selection in advance of those leagues coming out.
Yeah, that's what I just wanted to touch on this quickly, because if you're not in India, as many of us are not, then you might hear sort of crore and luck being thrown around and thinking, oh, gosh, what does that all mean? But it's actually quite simple. So
you say that. I had to look it up again today.
So India has a word for the English doesn't. It has a word for 10 million and has a word for 100,000. So 10 million is crore and 100,000 is luck. And conveniently enough for those of us in the UK, it's about 100 rupees to the pound at the minute. So 1 crore, 10 million rupees, that is about 100,000 pounds. 1 lakh is 1,000 pounds. So when we say that the teams have a budget of 90 crore, that means they more or less have £9 million budget, about 12 million US dollars. And the individual contracts, when you say like a player is going for 10, 12 crore in his contract, that means he's roughly going for 1.2 million pounds. So that's sort of the way to think of it. You'll hear these terms being thrown around and think, oh gosh, I don't know what that means, but actually it's pretty simple. Once you get your head around it,
it's not too bad, absolutely. And ultimately, 90 is the target figure for crore, and you can top yourself up to that. We'll have a look at the budgets in a bit more detail. But before we get into that, it's worth knowing a bit more about the picking process as well, because it's going to be done in rounds, right? There are a minimum of 3 big sort of broad bracket rounds. That's the capped players, then the uncapped, and then a final round where the unsold. But it's actually a lot more complicated than that, isn't it, Rich?
Yes, you want to flick onto the next view graph.
Is it on there? Is it?
Well, I'm not sure.
I didn't do that much, no. But I mean, go on.
Well, I mean, it starts off with the retentions. So the players that retained had a certain amount of value, whether they were the first, second, third, or fourth, and teams could decide to retain up to 4 players, of which 3 could be Indians or 2 could be overseas. And teams have, I think the Punjab have only retained 2. Some teams, I think like Mumbai, have retained 4. But that meant that they had a set budget for those retained players, which means they only have so much left for the draft.
Yeah.
And then, as you said, each player has their own base price. That's the minimum for which they can go for. And as you say, in the later rounds, things can be accelerated. If there's only one team interested, they don't necessarily have to auction every player. They can sort of accelerate through, or just pick the players. The teams indicate which players they want to bid on, and they'll concentrate on those.
Yeah, and there's some consequences to all of that. So the more successful recent teams, you'll probably find, have retained more of their players and have used, therefore, more of their budget to sort of keep that core in place. About half of the budget, 42 crore, leaving them, in those cases, 48 on the table for the auction. And then, as you say, 2 crore being the best player minimum reserve, which they've set for themselves. But actually, it could go a lot higher than that. And you might find, some players being bid up. And so that's that interesting last bullet you make there, is the strategy of any auction sometimes is to bid the price up, even if you don't necessarily want the player as much as you're bidding. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I could see easily the best players going for, in the draft 15 to 20, maybe even above 20 crore for the absolute creme de creme players in the draft.
Yeah,
or in the auction. Sorry, I should say.
Yeah, and there's a few other little nuances here. So some players who have been retained aren't actually being paid their full value, but that still gets taken from their total of 90. So there's some little nuggets there. And if you pay someone more than their purse price, what you paid for them, then that also gets taken off your budget. So I think Anrik Norkie is somehow getting 6.5 crore on a retained list, rather than the 6 he would have got otherwise. So that's why I think that they're knocking off a half crore for that one. Mm-hmm. Okay, are we done with budgets?
Yeah, we are. But I like. But I think that's the genius bit about the auction, isn't it? Because it's not a straight draft. You're not picking sequentially. So if you don't necessarily want that player, but he's going to go for big money, then you bid him up. So your rivals have to pay more for him. But obviously, go too high, and you might end up with him, anyway. So what you really want to do is get the players you really want, but you want to get your opponents to waste all their budget early on, so you can then hoover up the players you really want later on.
Yeah, and you can absolutely imagine it for a team like, say, Chennai Super Kings, who have made lots and lots of success from having experienced players in their franchise over the years. Your Faf du Plessis, your MS Dhoni's and the like. They're going to be more expensive, you would have thought. And if they want to continue that sort of franchise identity, they may be paying quite a lot for their main team of 11, you would have thought. And if you could take advantage of that maybe and make them overbid for that core, because your strategy is maybe to have the younger player that you can keep for a long period. We'll see, but that's one way it could play out, right?
Indeed, and all the franchises, they're busy wargaming this week. They'll have, Rajasthan are famous for doing, but I think all of the teams have followed their lead now, and they'll have people in the room playing the other franchises as they go through and do mock auction after mock auction after mock auction, and working out sort of that sort of a game theory perspective, the optimal strategy to build their franchise.
Okay, well, I went through all of the sort of the team hierarchies actually when I was drawing up some of this stuff, and actually only one team had a named auction strategist on their website, but they all have their other ways of titling it: the director of cricket, the team mentor, the icon if you're Sachin for Mumbai Indians, no less. But they'll all have their say.
Sachin, their game theory textbooks, I'm sure.
He's there. He's got a big paddle with bids on him. In the room. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through some of these teams now, and the order for this sort of discussion, I think, is your power rankings, Rich. Do you want to justify that beforehand? This
is my power rankings as of February. This is how I see the team shaping up in terms of who they've retained, their track record, how I see the franchises, the pecking order. And we'll revisit this as we go forward. But this is as of 6th of February. This is where I see the franchises.
I love this. This is an Instagram post in the making already for me. My weekly power rankings, according to Rich Baker. Okay, so here we go then. First up, the weakest team in the tournament you have as your very own Punjab Kings.
My own team. I've put them 10th. Where else could they be? Absolutely dismal last time out. And they had,
I couldn't find a fielding coach for them on Wikipedia.
I mean, there were two bright spots last season. And that was Ravi Bishnoi and KL Rahul, for the Punjab Kings. KL Rahul finished third in the run scoring, and Ravi Bishnoi was in the top 10 for economy rate. And they haven't retained either of them. They both disappeared off to the expansion teams. They've retained Mayank Agarwal and Arshdeep Singh, of course. Two very good players, but they're not the sort of the players you're building a franchise around. I mean, they're not sort of mainstays. Neither of them are mainstays of the Indian team. And its track record, the franchise has traditionally recruited badly. And, why is that going to change now? So for me, Punjab, they've got it all to do. They have got the biggest budget.
I was going to say, things in the pros column, 72 crore on the table.
They've got the biggest budget. It's just, do I trust them to spend it wisely? No, I don't.
Okay, well, Anil Kumble at the helm, and I think they've named Mayank Agarwal will be the captain this year. Do you like that as a choice for captaincy?
Yeah, I think so. I think you've retained him. You're going to build your franchise around him. Give that man the captaincy. Happy with that.
Okay, but as you say, they've let KL Rahul, Ravi Bishnoi, Nicholas Puran was an option to retain, Shah Rukh Khan, and obviously the Universe Boss himself. But they don't need any of that, right?
Yeah, I'm not too disappointed about that. I think we love Chris Gale and what a player he's been, but I think
his time is done. I'd be pretty surprised. I'd be pretty surprised if anyone picks him up. I don't know. I can't even say if he's registered. I think he has. Okay, number 9 in this countdown on your power rankings, Lucknow Super Giants with their brand new sparkly logo. What do you think of that one before we go any further?
I think it's not too bad, is it? It's sort of got the Indian flag and the cricket bat down the middle. I mean, these guys, like I said, they had a franchise before. They were called.
Looks like he's playing French cricket with that bat angle. That's going straight in the air.
What is so super about Giants anyway? It's not a great name. And in terms of they've done well. They picked up KL and Ravi Bishnoi, but then in the middle, a strange one, Marcus Stoinis, who what's the old boxing joke? Body of a Greek statue and the feet to match. He's a good bits and pieces cricketer. He's power with the bat, bit of medium pace with the ball, but is he the kind of overseas stars you want to build your franchise around? Not for me. Plenty of questions around the Super Giants. They weren't great when they were in Pune, so I'm not giving them the benefit of the doubt. They're ranked down at 9th.
Yeah, I think there's probably quite a question around Australians general in the IPL, and we expect the tournament to be played in India this year, fingers crossed, etc. But I think that most overseas players who have registered are from Australia, about 47, I think, off the top of my head. And actually, the sort of success rate, the hit rate for Australians coming into the IPL, I think has been pretty poor generally over the years. Certainly for teams picking people on the strength of their recent BBL season.
Yeah.
That hasn't actually always translated. No, Marcus Stoinis has got a bit more behind him than that. But, do you think that might affect the value of some of the Australians coming in?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, the Pakistan Super League runs after Big Bash, but given the issues between India and Pakistan, you don't get Pakistan players in the IPL, which means that the Big Bash is the last major franchise tournament prior to the IPL. So there could be a bit of recency bias there. Somebody performs well in the Big Bash and gets spotted. But yeah, maybe it's just to do with conditions or pitches or something. But yeah, generally Australians have flattered to see, but with a few notable exceptions. I mean, Josh Hazlewood was fantastic last year, and Glenn Maxwell's been a mainstay of the IPL for many a year.
And in fairness, David Warner until the last little bit of recent history.
Indeed.
Okay.
Indeed.
And you are neglecting one other source of talent seeking before I move on, which is, of course, the recent Under-19 Cricket World Cup. There's some big names potentially who've put their name into the hat from that one. Is there anyone that you've got in particular?
No one in particular from that, but I think you have to have played first class, right, in order to get in. So.
Yeah, I think they've been thin. But there's Baby AB who's in there, who's the player of the tournament. We'll see how he gets on. Maybe he gets pulled through. Okay, so down at number 8 then. A really disappointing franchise in many occasions, I'm afraid. I'm surprised, they've made it as high as number 8 in a little sense. You might be harsh on the Lucknow Giants, Lucknow Super Giants there, but Sunrisers Hyderabad. Can they use the power of Kane Williamson to pull themselves forward?
Probably not. Although they do have a named auction strategist because Tom Moody can't do everything himself. Of course, Oval Invincibles head honcho Tom Moody. I think Kane Williamson is obviously a brilliant cricketer, but is he worth 14 crore when you consider sort of some of the overseas talent available in the draft? Yeah, not for me. I mean, they weren't great last year. I don't necessarily expect them to improve massively this time round. So they're down at 8th, but they could have been 10th.
Yeah, and who have they let go? Well, again, another question there. They've let go Rashid Khan, for instance, again picked up by one of the expansion franchises. We've got David Warner, who we knew had a lot of beef, I think, with the Sunrise Hyderabad towards the end, including getting benched. Johnny Bairstow, though, I think would have been a fair shout for a lower core bid. Yeah, I mean, it's slightly odd.
Well, last season it took them 10 games to work out that Jason Roy might be worth a run in the side.
Yeah.
So David Warner was barely hitting off the square.
Yeah.
So yeah, issues with the way they run for me. Yeah, I don't necessarily expect them to improve massively.
Keep an eye on your Twitter. That's how they run. Okay, well, if they've got problems, what about Ahmedabad? They haven't got a logo, a team name, or anything yet. But what they do have is actually some pretty decent special picks, I think. I like the selections, and I think that Hardik Pandya is going to be the captain of this outfit. So, they've put in 37 crore straight off the bat.
Yeah.
Pick up those three. Is that a fair investment?
It's a good investment. Hardik Pandya, fantastic cricketer. Also box office. I think you need that for a new franchise as well. He's somebody who almost transcends cricket. He's star power in India. Then you've got the best T20 player in the world, in my book. Rashid Khan.
Never won an IPL trophy though.
Never won a franchise tournament in general, apparently.
Yeah.
But I think he's getting better and better with the bat. He's still so young, and he's played so many games that I think he's going to, in the next few years, really move into that kind of genuine all-rounder category, because he can score so quickly at the back end of an innings. Obviously, so difficult to play, takes wickets, low economy rate, and Shubman Gill as well. So decent bit. Nice to see Vikram Solanki getting a role there as the director of cricket. Let's see how they get on. And Gary Kirsten as a mentor, telling them to calm it down a bit, nurdle it into the leg side. Did he have any other shots other than that, Gary Kirsten? I suppose he sort of had some cut shot, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, took a long time to wake up and find out what he'd been doing a lot of the time. Ultimately, though, that should be an exciting foundation for the team. We'll see what they do with the remainder of the auction, of course. But they've got a big stadium to fill, so they'll be hoping to do that.
They will do, yeah. And I guess as a Welsh Fire fan, you'll be looking out for them with Gary Kirsten in the charge.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is genuinely a fair placing for them. Let's say that. With any new franchise, you don't know quite where to put them, but I think they are definitely, starting off in a decent position. Let's see how they go on. Okay, now into some of the more established, famous teams, and you've got the Kolkata Knight Riders, KKR, of course, down there in 6th. Don't fancy them to do something this year?
The hipsters' favourites, the KKR. They play T20 the way it was meant to be played, right? Sort of, go hard from ball.
Bish bash bosh.
Bish bash bosh. Yeah. They've kept the core of the side together. Dre Russ, Sunil Narayan comes back in as well. Chakravarti and Ia are obviously there for the future. They could have almost gone anywhere between sort of 6 and 3 in this case, but I don't know. They were pretty average for a lot of last season, and then they got hot towards the end, didn't they? And got themselves all the way into the final. But I don't know what was representative. Was it that hot streak towards the end, or was it sort of were they on a sort of gradual decline curve?
Depending on which KKR fan you ask, you might say that they've got rid of the problem, which might have been Owen Morgan.
Indeed.
Although if you ask another KKR fan, they might say Owen Morgan's captaincy was everything, and we don't necessarily know who's going to captain this team going forward. Do you think it's one of the retained players, or are they going to be in the market for a captain? Do you think on the weekend?
I think they'll get Owen Morgan because no one else will bid for him.
just a bonus 11th man stroke captain, specialist captain.
Yeah, just running on with the drinks, telling them where to move.
Okay, I will give you £5 if that's what their plan is. I think they're in the market for captain, and that's probably one of the biggest decisions that any team can have to make on an auction. I'm slightly suspicious about leaving it to that point. Don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, the logic extension of being the purest T20 is obviously taking the signs from the dugout approach that some teams have been trialing, and essentially just having basically a middle linebacker on the field who just basically takes the play call or take the instruction from the coach, relay it, not necessarily have a thinking captain on the field. You're basically just relaying instructions.
Are you minded to remind yourself of James Vince for the Southern Braves?
Yeah.
He wasn't even going so far as to do any of the instruction at all. He just stood there.
Yeah, just wave at Mahela every now and again.
Yeah, well, let's see how Brendan McCullum goes as a coach as well. That'd be an interesting one. So in at 5, again, a team that's historically had a fair sprinkling of English players amongst it has only retained the one in Joss Butler. Rajasthan Royals, of course, is who I'm talking about here. In fact, alongside Sanju Samson, likely the captain again, though, they've got a budget of 62 crore, which is pretty generous for a team that I think is pretty well run normally.
Yeah, and I know that Sanju Samson's one of your favourite players in the IPL, Tom. Rajasthan, obviously, they won it in the first year. Haven't done so well since, but have been lauded for sort of their alternative strategies, like during the draft. Very smart director of cricket in Kumar Sangakkara, slightly less smart mentor in Shane Warne, but
he knows a bit about cricket, Rich.
He doesn't. He certainly knows a bit about cricket. Maybe some of that he'll bring back to the London Spirit this summer. But otherwise, yes. This is an interesting one because I've almost put them ahead of KKR based on the fact that I think they will draft well. They obviously came back from the wilderness a few years ago after their 2-year ban and built quite a sort of a solid team in a non-expansion draft. I think they draft well. And for that reason, I've almost sort of given them the benefit of the doubt and put them in at 5th.
Okay. Let's say this is a team that wants to bring back some of their big name players from the auction process. Would you let's put some prices on heads. What are you saying for Ben Stokes on this rotation, who was previously a Rajasthan Royals player?
Well, he's not made himself available this time round. So,
of course. So that's an easy one, of course. Okay, let's go on. Jofra Archer?
Not available either.
Testing you. It's like you've been using your own app, Rich. Okay, final one. Liam Livingston.
Liam Livingston, I would pay 15 to 16 crore for Liam Livingston. Actually, maybe a little bit more because he's really his bowling on those slow pitches in the UAE was very difficult to get away. His ability to bowl both off spin and leg spin. So I think, I think Liam Livingston there could be more one franchise after his services.
So you're suggesting the quarter of the Rajasthan Royals budget could go on one player?
Yes, I think that's true throughout. I think the top sort of 2 players might go. I think the core of the side, you've got retained 3 to 4 players already, and then say you've got 50 to 60 left. I think teams will be willing to put like 40 of that on the next 2 to 3 players, and then because there's so many good players at the back end
some amazing players, yeah.
I think
okay, and you could be into the the 0.4 crore, the 4 lakh guys, yeah. Okay, interesting. Well, we'll see how that one pans out. So number 4 in your countdown, your power rankings. Unfortunately, you can't quite see it there with our faces, but that's okay.
Number 4,
Delhi Capitals. Okay. Again, had some recent success. Had looked good last year, based on a bowling attack mostly. And the one that stands out there is Anrik Nortje coming back at 6.5 crore. That seems like a bargain, right?
Yeah, that is a bargain, and I think that's why I put them in the top 4. They were good last year. I think they were disappointed how it sort of came. They couldn't finish it off. Obviously, they won the group stage on the back of that fantastic bowling effort. They've retained Axar Patel as well. They had Kagiso Rabada as part of that. They might be looking for him again this time round. And,
you'd be surprised if they weren't in the market for Kagiso Rabada. Right?
Yeah, and I think they'll look to replicate that model again. A very strong bowling unit backed up with some aggressive hitting. They've retained Pant, they've retained Prithvi Shaw. Get a bit more power, to bolster those, and I think they'll be very competitive once again.
Yeah, I like it. Interesting one about Ravi Ashwin, though. I suppose they would have probably had to use the top end of their picks for that, and they've decided not to retain Ravi Ashwin. Is he another player they think they'll return to?
I think that a bit like Hardik Pandya, Ravi Ashwin is such a marquee name that I could see the new franchises trying to pick him up. I wonder if he's Lucknow might be a spot for him.
Interesting. I kind of agree with that. I think they were kind of blessed with big name talent in Delhi, and not all of them over age, as it were. So actually, could have done more, but they've taken their 4, as have the Chennai Super Kings. Perhaps, I think defending champions, of course. You've got them going down to 3 here. So what has turned them down from champions to 3rd best in your mindset?
So I wondered around the decision to bring back MS at 12 crore. I think that Dhoni's been an incredible servant to the CSK over the last decade, and probably if we were sort of doing a T20 Hall of Fame, he'd be a first round ballot. We talk about if you think about sort of the greatest T20 players, he's in that conversation. Yeah. But he is coming to the end. He didn't have a great tournament last time round. Obviously, he brings a huge amount in terms of his leadership, but I wonder at what point that leadership transitions more into a coaching role.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought using up 12 crore on MS was a bit of an error there for me, and I'm sure there were CSK fans who think I'm an idiot for saying so. But for me, I would like to have freed that up to bring in a bit more talent. Love the fact they brought Moeen back. Huge vote.
Looks like a bargain at 8.
Yeah. Ruturaj Gaikwad, top scorer
Another
last
bargain.
year, exactly. And obviously Ravi Jadeja, fantastic marquee player. So good business. But I put them behind sort of 3 just because I think 1 and 2 a little bit ahead.
Well, and there's a bit of rumor going on around the MS Dhoni thing. The one rumor is that he actually asked not to be retained, so that the franchise for which he has played for so many years could actually use that money on building the strength of the squad and a younger foundation. There's also the fact that I think that once they decided they were going to retain him, actually they didn't retain him as the top pick, and actually therefore they freed something that way. So he's showing his leadership there, and I think they do want him as a leader and a captain. I think they think play it back.
That's fair enough, and I like that as well. That it does show that as much as they talk about the analytics of the draft, sometimes it is heart over head, and sometimes there's these emotional decisions are made. And I'm sure next weekend that there's going to be a bit of sort of bravado, a bit of machismo, like we need to go out and get this player, and there's going to be some odd behavior going on in order to make sure that people get their man.
Yeah, well, I've named a few players or a few influential persons in the draft at the top. Clearly, there are the most influential of all that aren't named on these, which are the owners, and they're going to have their say, right? Okay, so number 2, you have the Royal Challengers Bangalore, and what a fantastic set of retentions that looks like with Kohli, Maxwell, and Siraj. That presumably is the basis for your placing them second overall.
Yeah, I think so. I think that Maxwell is just in the form of his life in T20 cricket at the minute. He had a great IPL. He had a fantastic World Cup when Australia winning it. He's just come off a great big bash. I think he's been with RCB a few years now. I think he sort of fits in really well. And I think with Kohli sort of not captain, I don't think he's going to captain the side. He said he'd step down from that. He stepped down from captaining India. I think, taking a bit of that away from him in terms of all the other stuff going on and allowing him just to focus on his batting, I think it's really going to be a season. So I think, with his bat alone, that's take him halfway there.
You could absolutely see it, couldn't you? All those sort of considerations taken off. You can just focus on the thing we all love about Virat, which is his batting, really. You can just play and score huge bucketfuls of generous runs. We'd love to see it, right?
Yeah, and I think people will say like, "Oh, here you're just being blinded by the star names here. You're not looking at sort of the strength and depth. You're not looking at track record." But actually, I'm like, fair play. I'm being blinded by stars, but I think they're both going to have all 3 of them have an amazing season. I think that's going to take them sort of a long way into the latter stages of the tournament.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, let's address that head on then, that criticism. They have let players go, like sort of Padikkal, Chahal, Harshal Patel, Washington Sundar. Why didn't they keep one of those as well? Why not, Rich?
Well, I think they probably thought that, it was better to have the firepower in terms of the budget. They probably will try and target some of those players back, but they obviously decided just to have the flexibility. Or maybe the scouting department has said, actually, we think we know who the next generation of players coming through are, and we're going to go after those in the way that we brought those other youngsters through.
Perhaps. I'd have been tempted by some Washington Sundar, though. Okay. Unsurprisingly, you've gone for the perennial bookie favourite.
Yeah.
The superstar multi-IPL winning Mumbai Indians as your power rankings number 1. Justify that, Rich.
Well, if Bayern Munich are FC Hollywood, then Mumbai Indians are CC Bollywood. They are.
We just come up with that. Very good.
They are. I mean, up there with CSK in terms of the winningest franchises. I like. Well, obviously, we like Mahela Jayawardene. I think he's the best coach in T20 cricket. We saw that up close last summer with the way he sort of steered through James Vince as his on-field puppet. Southern Brave to victory. And I think I look at, already 4 players there that are the absolute, I mean, even if you put a four-man team out, that would be a competitive T20 side, I think, in terms of Rohit, Jasprit Bumrah, Sky, and Kieran Pollard. So I think that they already have the core of a fantastic side. I think they will recruit well because I think they have a very good front office in Zahir Khan. Sachin gives his 2 cents worth as well. But between Zahir Khan and Mahela Jayawardene, fantastic brain trust. They will recruit very well, complement that spine. And, it's the intangibles. It's just a franchise that wins. So similar to CSK. So for me, ranking them power one, maybe that changes next Monday when I see who they've recruited. But I'm putting them number one at the minute.
Okay, well, I mean, they had a disappointing season last year in the grand scheme of things. Is the pressure on them in that sense? If it doesn't go well in the first half of this IPL, could we see some bigger changes being called at the Mumbai Indians next year?
Potentially so, but I think with Mumbai, the pressure's always on. I think every season, if they don't win it, then that's seen as failure. So I think last year, yes, was a bit disappointing. But to what extent, Tom, can we write off last year as a bit of aberration? We had that split season. It was stopped by COVID. We came back. We played in the UAE. It wasn't quite the normal IPL because obviously the cricket was great, but we didn't have the crowds. We didn't have that normal dynamic. They didn't have their sort of the home stadium. So I think we can sort of write off 2021 a little bit, and I expect them to be very strong in 2022. And it's going to be interesting to see with the 10-team dynamic. But no, I think they'll be in the top 2 in the league. And then, as you know, where the playoffs is a bit of a lottery, but I think they'll be there at the latter stages.
Yeah, well, okay. So you've got them first. That's fine. There is clearly some good talent that they've let go as well. Likes of Ishan Kishan, I think, will go for a large sum. Trent Bolt will be in the first group of capped players going through. Rahul Chahar, a great option as well. So we'll see quite where some of that talent lands, and that will all be confirmed 12th, 13th of February. That's next Saturday, Sunday, from time of recording. Okay, Rich. Any last justifications or comments you have on your rankings or where you see this IPL auction going?
I'm just fascinated to see how it plays out. We don't see it particularly often that we have a mega auction where we don't have the right to match. So genuine free-for-all, it's going to be fascinating to see who ends up where.
I completely concur. And if you think it's exciting now, well, frankly, I can't wait for the 2nd of April when it all kicks off as well. So we will be tracing that journey through, as always, the 100 Club, home of short format cricket on YouTube or your podcast provider, wherever you get that from. If you enjoyed the comment, please let us know. Hit subscribe, and we'd much appreciate it. We'll keep the coverage up. And until then, Rich, go watch some PSL.
Will do.
Okay, see you next time on the 100 Club.